Hi, everyone. Maybe, there we go. So yeah, what I'm going to talk about actually segues really nicely with what Tasha just went through and really thinking about now that you have some information about your customer feedback, how you can really leverage that to elevate your CS initiatives into your broader company strategy. So a little bit about myself. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success for our higher ed division at EverFi. I've been in or around the higher ed industry for the better part of a decade. And I'm guessing that, like many of you, I sort of landed in the customer success field mostly by accident. And so about a year ago, I really wanted to kind of step back and think about my own career goals, sort of where I was, what my strengths were, and really where I wanted to be. And through that process, kind of came to the realization that a lot of the things that I do, both in my personal and professional life, really come back to my desire to create something out of nothing. I have really cool hobbies of quilting and baking, and so sometimes that looks like turning pieces of fabric into a portrait of foxes, and sometimes that's turning butter, sugar, and flour into penguins wearing scarves. But it's really my desire and skill at problem solving that sort of drives what I do in my both personal and professional life. And once I kind of had that clarity of what my own core competency was, it made it very clear of sort of what my path should be, and when it came to a decision-making point, what decision-making that should be. And I've had the opportunity of kind of going through a similar process with EverFi over the course of the past 2 years, and really being able to take a step back and think very critically about what the core value we were delivering to our customers were, and then helping rally the whole company around improving those initiatives to really maximize the impact we were having on our customers. So that's really the story that I want to walk you through today. A little bit about EverFi, if you're not familiar with us, we're in the ed tech industry. We deliver critical life skills to students and learners K-12 through adult. We educate over 12 million users. We work with 1,500 corporate partners and 1,300 colleges and universities across the country. And we really focus on non-academic drivers of student success. So really filling in the gaps that a student might not receive through other different means of education. So in K-12, that looks like STEM, entrepreneurship, financial wellness, digital literacy. In higher ed, which is specifically where I work, we really focus on alcohol, substance abuse, and sexual assault prevention education. So in our higher ed business, a couple years ago, we were focused on implementing sexual assault prevention education with hundreds of different customers across the country. And we really had a content-first approach. So we would get schools up and running with a specific area of content, and with that came different features, different usage numbers, completion rates, survey data, et cetera. But everything kind of came second to the content that we were delivering. And as the company grew, our business literally doubled in size over the course of the year. We started adding in, oh, that's not working properly, but you get the point. We started adding in additional layers of content, and things started getting a little bit more complicated. But we were still really focusing on the content, so a lot of our sort of supplemental features around our data delivery were kind of staying stagnant and left behind and not really nurtured. But as the front lines of a CS team, we heard day in and day out from our customers how valuable the data we were delivering to them was, and that it made their job easier, it made it easier for them to be a rock star in their own profession, and it made it easier for them to validate their decision to purchase an EverFi product. But here we were sort of not really investing in this feature. So we really wanted to kind of take a step back and figure out, well, how can we understand that this is a critical element of what we're delivering, and this is something that's making our customers more successful, so how can we really put some company investment into this feature? And for us, this was our data delivery, but I think, a lot of you probably have an understanding of there might be something that you're implementing right now that you know that your customers love, but maybe you haven't gotten enough resources to really build it out into what you as a CS team really understand its potential could be from what your customers are hearing. So we sort of took a step back and wanted to first really address the problem, like what was preventing us from delivering this maximum amount of impact of our data feature. And then once we came up with how we wanted to solve that problem, going back to our customers to make sure that what we were ultimately delivering was in line with what they were needing and what they were asking for. And then finally, we really did start bringing this across other areas of our company to make it much more impactful than just what CS was asking for. So when we started thinking about the problem, first we wanted to address what the internal stressors are. So the one that became very clear early on was our bottom line. At the time, we had been choosing to use a third-party vendor as our data delivery mechanism. It was easy. They had all of the sort of analytical and visualization tools. We didn't need to build it on our own, but it cost an extraordinary amount of money. And as we started adding in additional layers of content, it became exponentially more expensive to continue using them. If it had just been a cost issue, we probably could have gotten through it somehow, but that was really just the tip of the iceberg. The third-party vendor that we were using used a different data mechanism than we did, so we had to spend just an immense number of hours translating our data into the way that their system worked. So we were using both our time, research time, just a lot of internal man hours, which also meant that it took us a long time to get our delivery back to customers. It literally was a 6-month turnaround from a course implementation to data delivery, which in the technology world is just unacceptable. And it also meant that we could only do this process once a year because of the amount of effort it took to get it through. And then ultimately it affected customer outcomes. So of the customers that were utilizing this feature, we knew that they were more successful, but we also could hear from customers that for many users, the UI of the third-party vendor was too difficult to navigate. They were too intimidated to go in and play around and take advantage of it. So ultimately, we were spending a ton of time and a ton of money for something that wasn't actually getting that much usage. But of the usage it was getting, it was really important. So once we kind of had a full lay of the land of what our challenges were, it became very clear that this wasn't just a customer success issue. And one of the things that I think is really important as a CS team, we often talk about the external relationships that we're building, but what makes us really successful is the internal relationships that we're building. So working very closely with other internal stakeholders, because this wasn't just our time, it was our product and engineering and research time, and getting them to acknowledge the amount of challenges that they had. And if we could all rally behind this as a company-wide initiative, everyone would be able to deliver a better product, have better customer outcomes, and lower the internal stressors as well. Once we got this up to the executive team level, it also became clear that even though it was our line of business that was developing the need, this had consistencies in what our other business units were working on as well. Our higher ed business was a little bit further along on the need for delivering data, but we could see that because of the customer outcomes that we were experiencing through this feature, if we could build out something that was much more nimble and custom to our business, that we would be able to bring that same level of impact to our other business units as well. And it was a really big validation to move away from a third-party vendor and put in some serious resources into what we were doing. So once we sort of decided that the right thing to do was to build something internal that could be very flexible to our business needs, because higher ed, our line of business, was really driving the project, we wanted to make sure that we were going back to our customers and understanding what the true need was, that we were meeting their expectations. So the first part of that was to collect usage behavior, super straightforward. What we found was that 50% of our customers were engaging with our data tool, and about 14% of them would be considered power users. So not the worst numbers in the world, but definitely not what we were going for. From our power users, we created a focus group. So we created a small focus group of about 10 to 12 users that were very engaged in our data to really understand, for someone at an institution of higher ed, what is the value of data that you can bring back to your institution? Do different people on a college campus have different needs for data? And the answer to all of that was yes. And we figured this out by doing persona-based activities. So really thinking about different kinds of administrators, senior versus junior, and what's the value that they need to pull back so that when we're creating our actual feature, we can really tailor it to the kind of user that's implementing our product. Once we came up with a beta version, we went back to our focus group and allowed them to play around with it, give us some additional feedback, making sure that it was in line with what they were looking for. And then once we launched, we even had dedicated engineering hours throughout the full first year to make sure that we could continue to iterate on the feature, and really, once we saw customers going in and using it, understand that it was in line with what we were trying to accomplish. So since releasing our new feature, it's become a really critical piece of our customer journey. For one, it's a major component of our sales deck and our overall pitch with prospects, to the point that the way that we interact with data to our customers has become a major market differentiator for us. There are lots of companies in the ed tech space that are delivering content, and very few of them are talking about how they can interpret their students' usage behavior survey data to really inform the kind of content that they need to provide back to their students. So once you start talking to administrators that sort of understand that as a concept, there's really no one else in the market that can hold a candle to us on what we've built out there. And then post-sales, it's also gotten integrated into our entire onboarding, customer engagement, our EBRs, everything along those lines. And just to share a little bit of numbers of sort of where we're at right now. So I mentioned that when we started, we were looking at 50% of our customers engaging with it at all. 14% of them are power users as of a week ago. We're at 90% of our customers are engaging in our data platform, and 50% of them would be power users. So when we really went into this project thinking about lowering the barrier of entry and getting more people engaged in something that we knew was really delivering impact, we've definitely done that. We also just, in the fall, did our first NPS survey. We did a whole customer survey which included an NPS question, and from that data, we found that 77% of our customers are indicating that the data we deliver to them is very important in their decision making. So not only have we built something that really meets their needs, but because we've built it into the entire customer journey, it's become a really critical piece of their entire experience with us. We continue to iterate on it as well. We've made 2 very big developments into it this past year to sort of add on additional features and what they can do within our data platform. And then more importantly is, as our executives sort of saw early on, it's become the entire backbone for all of our data and reporting dashboarding across the entire company, to the point that this is actually a slide that was shared with the whole company about a month ago, that is really thinking about how we're approaching our business model moving forward. And whereas we used to be very content first and data second, we're now moving towards allowing people to have a comprehensive data control center to really understand more about their students and their users to better deliver custom content based on how they're identifying their students' needs. And so this was something that we could tell from our customers very early on, and have now been able to increase the impact of what we really developed as a need. I'm not too ashamed to say that sometimes I've made cookies and I use salt instead of sugar. It's really horrible. But we made some mistakes along the way of this as well. So I thought I would sort of share our learnings there. We had to do a total product overhaul 6 months in. The first thing that we built was not nimble, it was too expensive, it was too slow, and so it wasn't solving basically all of the problems that we set out to solve. So we switched to something more nimble. We went to a SQL-based program and were able to replicate 6 months of work in 2 weeks. Couldn't really have predicted that before, but you learn. That we couldn't be all things to all people. When we set out for the goal of really lowering the barrier of entry to increase engagement in this tool, we knew that we were going to be taking away features that were really important to some people. And we very consciously made that decision in the hopes that what we would ultimately be doing is increasing the impact of our broader customer base. And I think from the numbers that I shared, that definitely was true, but we certainly had to have some difficult conversations along the way. And finally, the devil is in the details. I mean, I think as much as we went through every use case of really rolling this out and transitioning customers into a new feature, we missed things. People lost data. It happened. We tried. I think, just trying, I think if I could do it all over again, just being really diligent about writing out anything that a customer might be impacted by a big feature change like this. And so finally, just some key takeaways. For me, sales and renewals are really only part of the story. I think if you had looked at our numbers about 2 years ago, you wouldn't have necessarily thought that there was a problem. We weren't increasing an extraordinary amount of churn. We were bringing in net new customers, but it was really about how they were engaging with us post-sale and really understanding how we could drive more impact to how they were using us. That's really made those numbers even better since. And then these two sort of go together to me as both understanding your cross-functional and different lines of business if you're a big enough company. There's really more in common than we necessarily think. I think at EverFi in particular, we sort of think that our different lines of business are really these standalone organizations that don't really look or behave like one another. But once we really started talking about what the core issue was, it was very clear that we had a lot of needs in common that allowed us to really rally together to elevate this and raise the red flag up to our senior leadership. And then finally, that the product really informs the sales approach, but it's really important that your customers are informing the product. And if you don't have a good way of bringing that customer feedback loop, I mean, we started very rudimentary in this. We literally had a Google form where when someone called us with some kind of input, we just logged it into the Google form so that once a month, once a quarter, whatever it was, we could meet with our product team and put some numbers behind what customers were saying. It wasn't necessarily the most sophisticated way of starting off, but it really allowed us to start building that bridge over to our product team and making sure that we were elevating the voice of the customer. So that's my story.
Are there any questions?
Cool.
Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, yeah.
You talked about being able to, you couldn't be everything to everybody. I know there's always this pressures of, I need this feature, I know I need that feature. How are you guys able to work with product management and with a leadership team to decide this is what we think the customers are going to need and this is the one that we can let it go and will not lose business because of letting these features go?
Sure. I mean, a lot of it was that we had good analysis that schools that were engaging with our data had better renewal, better upsell rates. And so it wasn't just that, like, I want this button blue, right? I wouldn't have engaged in the same kind of process for a really small feature change. But really when we were seeing that when customers engaged with us in this specific manner, we were seeing better outcomes. And that we also, we would love to get more customers engaged with it, but there were so many things happening internally first that were preventing us from getting there, that we kind of needed to break down the internal barriers before we could even start talking about a product improvement.
How did you determine who was a power user?
Yeah, so we collected data about how many times users were engaging in the platform and just started breaking it down into number of logins over the past period. And we defined power users as customers who were logging in 11 or more times over the past, I think, quarter is what we did.
Did you have a problem? I don't know how it works for you guys, but did you have a problem in terms of, you collected this data from surveys, you got this feedback. In terms of the relationship you had with your devs and product and stuff like that, was that something you needed to kind of, did you have alignment on all that from the beginning so you could use that data and really influence, or was it a fight for you guys?
I think it was a fight. I think that, again, what allowed us to get that alignment was demonstrating how hard everyone was working on the way that we were doing it previously. It was a huge pain point, and my CS team could feel it on a daily basis. And once we kind of had the realization of, we're definitely not the only people feeling this, I could go and make a case of, we can look at how many engineering hours you're spending on doing this, and we can look at how much we're paying this third-party vendor, and then sort of making a case by what are the pain points that we can solve across different functions.
Okay, Lisa, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks for your time, everybody.